Welcome to Procurement Says No, Episode 7. Hello, Eduardo.
Hello, Rich. God, we've made it to 7. I know we said last time we made it to 6, and now we're at 7. We could even make it to,
8.
Woohoo!
Yes, it's very exciting. We are well on our way to winning our first award, I reckon. So it's all very good. And today, on Episode 7, we have yet another guest star. This time we have an expert in all things legalese. Mark Sherwood-Edwards of Clearview Legal, who is here to give us all, a clear view on all sorts of legal questions that we procurement types need to know. It's the law, you know.
It's the law?
The law. And we have the news.
Have you, just before we go to the news, have you ever been in court?
No. Well, maybe once.
No, I don't believe you. Ever been sent down?
No. Maybe once again.
Yeah, I don't believe you were there either.
And we have more questions from the post bag in Ask Rich and Ed. So first, the news, and huge news for public procurement types.
Mm-hmm.
With the Procurement Bill Royal Ascent received on the 26th of October. This envisages changes to the old OJU EU public procurement rules and will now be called the Procurement Act 2023. The idea is to make it slightly more bearable, slightly more flexible, slightly better, but there's still quite a lot of bureaucracy and lots of loading of documents into a big government system in the name of transparency. I don't think this big system is ready yet, but the whole thing doesn't come into force until, wait for it, October 2024. So when was Brexit, the vote for Brexit? 2016. So just 8 years later, we've got round to changing the OJU rules. That's not bad, is it?
So has it actually, this is only for our British listeners as well, this.
This is the UK only.
Less bureaucratic and convoluted for public sector bodies and others, because it's utilities and national infrastructure that are involved in this as well. Does it make it easier for them? Quicker?
Well, if you read the 128-page document, and there's a clue there already, you will discover that it is slightly less bureaucratic, although my understanding, and I haven't read the whole thing, obviously, is there's going to be this big government system where everybody uploads their tenders into it in the name of transparency. So that bit is going to cause a bit of heartache for everybody.
Mm.
But there you go. Maybe we should do a major review of it in episode 27, once we've read the 128-page document and the additional appendices and that, or not.
I think for that one, Rick, I might be on holiday.
Oh.
That sounds very, very exciting episode.
Once you get to section 125 and a whole load of appendices, the 128 pages is just the start, Ed.
So perhaps the Cheetah Institute should do some sort of survey of what public sector people think about that. We could do a survey.
Love a survey. Perhaps by the end of this episode we'll have the result.
No.
Anyway, more news. Major news just in from Zip. Zip have now traded up, or is it down, from Apple AirBuds to a free Yeti cooler if you demo the Zip software. So that's great news, just in time for winter in the Northern Hemisphere. Ooh. We'd love to demo it here on Procurement Says No, so please get in touch.
That's going to be a coolbox, you say?
A coolbox just in time for winter.
Perfect. That's perfect timing, isn't it? Perhaps that's for the Southern Hemisphere audience of Zip.
It is.
Perhaps that reflects a new strategy to expand into Australia and New Zealand and South Africa and Brazil.
As long as the coolbox is full of Apple AirBuds, I'll be okay with that. So just a bit more from me, a bit of chart news, of course. And again, we are big in Nicaragua with episode 6. How do you like your stakeholders? Blasting into the chart straight in at number 4. I don't have any other chart positions this time, though. I'm sure they were all good.
That's fantastic, isn't it? Nicaragua. I'm just thinking, is that because there's only an audience of 3 people for podcasts in Nicaragua?
There was just the one last time, but there are 3 now. He's got 2 mates. I don't know what the actual numbers are. Probably in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, I imagine so. Yeah, we should do a tour. We should go to Nicaragua, and we'd be welcomed as podcast heroes through the streets of... I don't even know what the capital of Nicaragua is. Lima?
Managua. And another bit of news from me. In the last episode, we mentioned the Supply Chain Excellence Awards 2023 with the strapline 27 years of celebrating true supply chain excellence, which took place in early November. And there were 26 categories, including Best Haircut and Nicest Shoes, 300 entries from 150 companies. I'm not even going to go through these because there were just too many winners. It's ridiculous. 26 winners.
Did we get an award? Did they have Best Procurement Funny Podcast?
No, that wasn't even one of the categories. Too many winners. So rather than droning on about all 26 winners, head over to logisticsmanager.com to see the whole list. And Ed and I would love to host the awards next year, please.
Ooh.
We'd be low cost and wonderful.
Cheaper than Rory Bremner.
We are cheap as crisps.
Yes, exactly. Cheap as crisps. So, do they add an award for each year of the awards ceremony?
Yes, I think the formula is the number of winners is n-1, where n is the year of the awards.
So, I've got a little thing I'd like to discuss. Building on your procurement awards theme, a couple of podcasts back, we talked about all these award ceremonies. So, episode 6, I think it was. There's a form to these things. So, list of procurement tech providers. There seems to be a whole range of people coming out at the moment with their view on technology providers. And I listened to one of the webinars from Spend Matters. They call it the 50-50 list. They're 50 best companies in tech to listen to, then 50 others, and then they actually add another 5 ones to watch potentially in the future. Procurement Magazine does a top 10 list every year. You see that Technology Magazine does a list. You get Procure Tech doing a top 100 list. It's going from 10 to 100. No doubt before we know it, there'll be like the top 250 procurement tech vendors, most of whom will be bankrupt within 1 or 2 years after they've been in the list as the ones to know. It's too long and detailed, and it's so full of vendors that you've never heard of with bizarre names. I'm like, how does this work in the funky name charts? Mythra AI. Now, where does Mythra come from?
So Mythra was an ancient Iranian deity of the covenants of light, justice and the sun, also revered by the Romans.
Cognitive spend intelligence. What does that mean? Right, so we've got a term. These are the themes from Spend Matters, right? Rise of intake management. I need to pee, which we talked about with Zip. Rise of generative AI. Ooh. What's that then? Machine learning is where it just learns. It has rules and it follows those rules, which is used a lot in invoice matching, for example. And then generative AI, a big bullshit bubble, isn't it, really?
Gains consciousness and takes over the world.
Ooh.
Oh, hell.
I need to pee. That's just P2P, isn't it? Or source to pay. But it's just got a new name. I think there's an awful lot of nonsense teed up around this. So anyway, just going back to the Spend Matters thing, 50-50 list. They say that they've got 105 vendors they talk to. They don't take any money from these vendors, they say, but they did say at the same time that 47% of the 105 are subscribers, which in my book is about 48 or 49 suppliers. So read of that what you must. Nothing dodgy. But in terms of the whole range of procurement solutions, we've got about 10 to 15 different types of software. Suite providers, contingent workforce, sourcing vendors, strategy development, supply management, spend analytics, CLM, B2B, tail spend, expense management vendors, intake management vendors, orchestration vendors, and emerging workflow vendors.
It's too difficult for me, this stuff, Ed.
Yes, and they've all got wonderful names. So I don't know, I'm maybe a bit cynical about this stuff. Are you going to sell to the CFO 16 different solutions? All
of the vendors, all the time. You'll need one of each of those, and then you'll have a fully integrated system of 50 different things.
It's quite hard not to go with an Oracle or an SAP Ariba or a Coupa these days. So I find it all a bit confusing.
It's just because you're an old git, Ed, really.
Yes. So it's all nonsense, folks. Don't believe what you read.
And on that bombshell, it's now time for Ask Rich and Ed. Ooh. And we have a couple of questions from our avid listeners all around the world. Here's number 1. How much time should I spend visiting suppliers or meeting stakeholders, and how much money should be spent on travel and expenses when working in procurement? That's from Clyde Brown from Ottawa in Canada.
Ottawa is the capital of Canada. Look at that.
Not only is Procurement Says No your source for all procurement nonsense, but we can also do some basic geography as well.
So,
can we do kings and queens as well?
Right, so I'm going to be quite radical here. I think we should be seeing your supplier once a week. I think you should be spending a lot of time with your supply base. I think you should understand what they're doing, what they do, what their facility looks like, how they deliver to you. Obviously, there's a restriction on that from a cost perspective. I think suppliers should be coming in to see you regularly. Certainly when I started my career in electronics procurement, I saw suppliers every day. And then in terms of travel and expenses, I think a good starting point would be, so whatever the procurement function costs to run, I would look at 10% on expenses.
Well, before the days of Teams, I would expect my buyers to be out of the office a couple of days a week. Now it's a lot easier to have Teams meetings, but I think there's nothing like a proper face-to-face, particularly visiting supplier sites and production and material processes and things, seeing their factories and understanding what they do.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. So 50% suppliers, 40% stakeholders, internal team 10%.
Yeah.
And, Ed, it just so happens that I have data from the Cheetah Institute on this very matter. I looked this up earlier.
Ooh.
And they say that 90% of procurement departments do spend about 10% of their budget on expenses. 80% of procurement departments spend about 15%. And 20% spend 80%. And I might have made all that up. So question 2. Do you want to do question 2?
Are there any thought leaders or gurus I could learn from that you would recommend? That's from Hee-Jin Choi in Seoul in South Korea.
Oh, hell, I had that as question 5, Ed.
I'm sorry, did I ruin it for you?
Well, there's me and you, Ed.
Spot on.
There are a lot of procurement protagonists on Linked Up. I'm not sure how many are huge leaders in the world of procurement, though. Peter Smith is quite entertaining. Bit of an eco-warrior at times, banging on about carbon reduction. We should get him on.
I think we will. I'll reach out to Peter and get him on. I was going to say Peter Smith as well. I think it's thought leaders. I think it's quite neutral in his view. It can be quite contentious too.
Yeah, I think he's quite funny at times. I think he says what everyone else is thinking.
Yeah.
Another one's Tom Mills. I think I've seen him a couple of times on Linked Up. He's quite entertaining. We should get him on. Yeah. But the most successful procurement bloke, and we've talked about him before, is Tim Cook at Apple.
Ooh.
So he must be good at procurement. That's where he started. We should get him on.
Yes. I did look him up on Linked Up. He's not on there. I'd make him my friend and then I'd send him a request, and I'm sure he doesn't get many requests.
Yeah, then you could be best buddies and you could get him on the next show. So now we turn our gaze to all aspects of commercial contracts and that. All you ever wanted to know about legal things. And it's time to welcome yet another special guest star, Mr. Mark Sherwood-Edwards. Hello, Mark.
Right, hi there. I didn't know I was a guest star, but I'm glad to be one. Thank you.
Eduardo, please do the honours and introduce Marky Mark.
We can't be abusive to Mark today because he will sue us. Okay, that's the first thing to just get over. So no rude remarks, no questioning his judgment, Rich. But just in terms of his background, he's like you and me, Rich. He fell into law by accident because he couldn't think of anything else to do. He also qualified as a barrister. Be very careful what we say about him. But then he did his pupillage, but then didn't become a barrister type. Left the law and ended up as an advertising copywriter in Amsterdam. Won't ask any questions about why Mark spent time in Amsterdam. Was it the drink? The prostitutes, the drugs, I don't know.
Turns out it was the pretty girls.
Worked for a couple of legal firms, Olswang and Garrett's. Went in-house, worked for NCR and worked for Exchanging, where our paths crossed. And as I say, I really like Mark's style. And now he's got his own business called Clearview. Writes some really interesting stuff around IP and data protection. A nice legal person, one of those horrible ones that we have to deal with. So yeah, that's Mark.
Thank you very much.
So Mark, we have lots of questions for you from friends of ours who are asking.
Yeah.
Firstly though, although you never worked as a barrister despite the training, which in your opinion is best, Costa or Starbucks, or do you prefer to make your own?
Oh, neither. I think they're both horrible. I'd go Cafe Nero or Independent, given the choice.
Ed's a Mellow Birds guy.
I love it. Mellow Birds, yeah, 2 spoonfuls though.
So why did you leave the law? You fought the law?
And the law won-ish. I think it's a 50-50 draw, right?
So let's just quickly talk about the Magic Circle. Why is it called the Magic Circle? Do they pull rabbits out of hats?
No, they print money.
Okay.
I'm not even sure who's in the Magic Circle anymore. There are about 5 or 6 law firms. But I think a lot of them got taken up by big deals with American companies, so American law firms.
And the old sawing ladies in half probably isn't done any longer, is it?
Well, no, but maybe they saw non-binary people in half, I suspect.
Let's not go there. Right, let's talk about indemnification. As in this sentence, which scares the willies out of me, the indemnifying party becomes responsible for a loss only after the indemnified party pays. Please explain indemnifying.
Okay, well, I've never seen that sentence before, and it's quite rare. Okay, so I'm going to go all educational now, so you can beat me if it gets too educational. But do you get the difference between a warranty and an indemnity?
I was going to talk about warranties next, but yeah, you tell me.
Okay, a warranty is a promise in the contract. So contract's made mainly of warranties. I will do X, typically, yeah. Though it gets used in different ways in different kind of contracts. But and if you're in breach of your warranty, the other guy can make a claim in damages, right? And damages are limited by a number of rules, which is the two main ones are you're only liable for damages that were it's got to be reasonably foreseeable at the time we signed the contract and a duty to mitigate. And typically there's a breach of contract. An indemnity is if X happens, then Y. Usually if X happens, then pay me some money, right? So there's no breach of contract, something's happened. It's not subject to the reasonable foreseeability test in theory, and there's no duty to mitigate. A really good example is an IPR indemnity. A software supplier will typically say, use my software. It's a claim by a third party that you are infringing their IPR because using my software. I will indemnify you. And that means that whatever the claim is, whether the claim is right or wrong, you will pay out, right? And it stops the buyer having to do any due diligence on actually, do you have the typed IP or not? There's a claim, I will pay out. That is a normal one. So the sentence you said, indemnifying party becomes responsible for loss only after the indemnified party pays, is someone trying to cut back their responsibility. Software supplier steps in and actually manages all the litigation, right? Picks up all the costs. So that sentence makes no sense, and that's the difference between the two, the warranty and indemnity.
Sounds good. And what about a collateral warranty?
Okay, a collateral warranty, you don't get them that often. They're typically, you get them in the construction industry, and it's where, let's say, somebody's building a house for the buyer. The buyer is going to sell it to other persons. Historically, you couldn't take the benefit of someone else's contract. So the builder says, yeah, I will warrant to future buyers that the roof is good for 10 years. That's a collateral warranty. And a collateral contract is a contract which is on the side of the contract. Sometimes you do a deal with 5 contracts in it. Some could be collateral to the others. And sometimes they're a way that if you can't get what you want under the main contract, you drafted it wrong, you claim there's actually a collateral, a side contract, not written, which gives you this particular benefit.
You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes,
you can get what you need.
So changing tax slightly, Mark, it's so complicated, the law. Is that just a device to make lawyers rich rather than keeping things simple? Because I think most procurement people, when you get involved in big contracts, intellectually it gets quite a struggle.
Right, like all these things, the gift is being able to see the structure and the chaos, right? When someone gives you a contract, what's the first thing most people do is they start reading it. That's a mistake. Never do that. Contract's 50 pages, 100 pages long. The key bit is in a page and a half, right? You distill it down. If you start reading the whole contract, you get totally lost. Put the contract on one side. You go for a coffee somewhere, not Starbucks, not Costa, and you think about what are the key points of this deal for me? You know, how long do I want it to last? Who can terminate? Can I terminate? What are my sunk costs? What are my risks? You work all that out. Then you read the contract, see to what extent what's in the contract matches what you want. So the point is, there's lots of wood for the trees. A lot of lawyers actually do like to complexify because it's like all jargon protects the people making money out of the jargon. It's not that complicated if you think about what are the key things am I trying to do.
Yeah. I did some work years and years ago. When I was speaking to the lawyer, they just said basically the game for them was it was just like an intellectual point scoring process because they were dealing with another, big law firm. And it was just really about egos and winning the argument. It didn't feel like it was in the best interest of the clients, that sort of, to your point, over complicating things.
Yeah, well, it's not that unusual for anyone who's on a meter. People who are running on a meter don't think, most of them don't think I'm going to extend this as long as possible and make as much cash. But the fact you're paid by the hour actually does just drive the way the business will operate. And you get that a lot with lawyers. The lawyers are really trained to be risk averse, very risk averse. And if you study law in a common law country, look what you're reading is cases. And cases is where things went wrong, right? And they went to court. Right? And you start thinking that is the normal. Really very, 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 very rare. They don't represent what really happens. But of course, you're now as a lawyer hypersensitized to this. So you chuck in loads of stuff, you're worried about your risk of getting sued.
Right, okay. So, consequential losses. How consequential do they need to be?
Consequential losses, okay. Right, I went back to the beginning, breach of contract, right? What are you liable for? The normal rule is you're liable for things that are reasonably foreseeable at the time you signed the contract. Another way of phrasing that, in contemplation of the parties at the time to sign the contract, and things which flow in the natural course of events, right? That's what you're liable for. In certain circumstances, you might be liable for something more. Okay, there's some classic examples. This is the Hadley-Baxendale rule that probably rings a bell. 1854, the guy's got a mill. The mill shaft is broken. The mill's not working. He needs to get it fixed. He's got to go to the mill manufacturer. He goes to a transport company who said, will you take my crankshaft to the manufacturer? And the manufacturer said, yeah, if you get it to me by tomorrow noon, I can fix it for you. The mill owner says to the transport company, can you pick it up and take it and deliver it by tomorrow noon? Now, the transport company doesn't deliver it by tomorrow noon, right? Which means the mill is shut for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, and loses all its money. The mill owner sues a transport company, claiming all his lost profit. And the transport company wins the argument, says no, because how would I be supposed to know that because I'm transporting this crankshaft, your business is now at a standstill? You didn't tell me this. If you told me that at the time, it would have been in contemplation of the parties, and I would have been on my best behaviour and got it there. But you didn't tell me that, so you can't expect me to pick up the liability. Direct losses, things which are the normal course of things, and indirect or consequential losses, things which don't normally happen, but might happen if you told me about it at the time.
But often suppliers will immediately cross that out when they see anything to do with consequential losses. So what you're saying is it can be difficult to claim against consequential losses. Some
contracts make explicit reference to contemplation of the parties at the time. Most contracts nowadays will exclude indirect consequential losses. In a sense, you could argue you don't need to exclude them because they're so rare. The really sensible way to look at this is I'm setting my price for my product and my service. What risk am I willing to take on for that? And if you've got limitation liability and that covers everything, you probably don't care whether it's consequential, not consequential, loss of profits, not loss of profit, something else. You've got a finite cap. It's easiest, in my view, to say, okay, anything you can claim under the finite cap, fine.
Another one which came up a lot in my last line roll, and I used to laugh in the face of this discussion, we had a lot of chemical suppliers, and they said, oh, we're going to have to stop supply, it's force majeure. We haven't completed our maintenance for the weekend, and we've had to close our plant down. And I would say, that's not force majeure.
Yeah, no, it's not force majeure. Force majeure is not something that exists outside of the contract provision, right? You have a force majeure clause. You get this thing, contract law called frustration, where you can't always get what you want, right? But frustration is a kind of separate legal doctrine which very rarely applies. If you want force majeure to apply, it's I can't do what I promised to do because something else has happened. For example, I can't deliver you 2 tons of coal because there's a national strike. That may be force majeure and may not be force majeure. It depends on the definition of force majeure in your clause. And nowadays, because most things are digital, it's quite hard to apply force majeure to digital stuff because you can't say, well, I'm sorry, my server went down because you should have backed it up. My data center went down because you should have an alternative data center. Digital stuff, it's hard to run force majeure arguments.
So ideally, you'd have to define it somewhere in a clause.
The general definition is beyond the reasonable control of the parties. And then you get a more expanded one where someone will say, yeah, but anything which you could have done by, thinking about it, putting it ahead properly, that's not force control. So don't come to me if your infrastructure is crap. That's your problem, not mine.
Absolutely. So you'd have the full force of the law.
Yeah.
So the last one on my list is tort. What is tort, and are liabilities unlimited in tort, Mark?
Yeah, so tort is a wrong someone's caused to. It's a civil wrong. Okay, so damage to your property, damage to you, stealing your property can be a tort. I mean, it's a criminal offence, but it's a tort as well. That kind of stuff. The most common tort in the professional world is negligence. So if your doctor is negligent towards you, you may or may not have a contract. But if you didn't have a contract, that would be negligence, which is a kind of tort. And if you remember your O-level French or GCSE French, it's tort is a wrong. It's a Norman French word came over with William the Conqueror. So typically, because there's no contract in place, the damage is not limited by contract. Someone was negligent, someone crashed their car into you, you don't have a contract with them. But it is subject to duty to mitigate and a reasonable foreseeability, right? Unlike contract, it's not foreseeability at the time you sign the contract, because there wasn't one. It's a time when the tort is committed. Where it arises more commonly in the business world is you can have contractual duty and a tortious duty existing at the same time. Like a doctor's a good example, or someone doing, your IT maintenance would be a good example. But typically they overlap, and in fact, your limitation of liability will typically say any claims arising in relation to this contract, whether made in contract, tort, misrepresentation, restitution, there's a whole list of things. So it all boils down to limitation of liability. But even if you didn't have that clause there, most courts would say, well, actually, look, it's one relationship. We're not going to let you bypass this particularly by going down the tortious route rather than the contract route as a general rule. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. In fact, this is the most sense I've heard in legal stuff for a long time. Practical, pragmatic, commercial thinking. I love it.
Yeah.
Let's have a break. I need to pee. You make the coffees.
There you go.
Finally, from me, Mark, best endeavours. Are they ever reasonable? See what I did there?
Yeah. The whole kind of best endeavours. Well, take a step back, right? There's a continuum from you get the services as is, no commitment to reasonable skill and care, reasonable endeavours, which is kind of reasonable skill and care, and then you get best endeavours at the other end, right? Interpreting them they're nice at a theoretical level, right? But actually, if you ever had to try and apply them in practice, it's actually quite hard because interpreting, you're supposed to take the actual wording of the clause, what the rest of the agreement says, the purpose of the agreement, surrounding commercial context. That's what you're supposed to do. But there is a balancing of interests. Even if you say best endeavours, you're not expected to go further than the person you promised best endeavours to would do if they were in your shoes. There is a overall cap in that sense. There's all protection there. You don't have to drive your business to bankruptcy, insolvency, just because you've got a best endeavours obligation. There is a commercial protective wrap around that. What it might be in a particular circumstance is really hard to predict. There's so many variable things. There was a good example of, and this applies to reasonable endeavours, is a builder roughly when Lehman Brothers went bust. He had a reasonable endeavours to procure the completion of the building by a specified date. In fact, he couldn't do it because Lehman Brothers went bust and he couldn't get access to the funding. The court said actually the reasonable endeavour was all about protecting them from things like weather and stuff. It didn't protect the builder from not having funding in place. Even if you've got one of those in place, it doesn't cover every reasonable endeavours, best endeavours. It doesn't cover every obligation. You have to look at it in context. Saying, what was it intended to cover? And that's slightly problematic because you might have agreed this 9 years ago, right, with someone. And even the relevant people might not be around. If you're dealing with a big bank, trying to sell a big bank something, you'll get the procurement say, oh, God, we have best endeavours, right? You may kind of weaken it by best commercial endeavour or whatever, something like that. In the end, unless you've got a good reason not to, you probably think, actually, I'll live with it. Because in practice, who knows what the difference actually means.
So, Mark, just change the track slightly. Which jurisdictions are best to contract in? We've got a legal system in England and Wales. Because of the Commonwealth and all that, our legal system went to a lot of the rest of the world and sort of remained pretty much the same, I think, in a lot of countries. Are there particular jurisdictions that are better to contract in? Some that are worse? It struck me as the US is quite litigious. What are your thoughts around where you contract?
Right. By where you contract, you mean what's the governing law? And if there's a dispute, what jurisdiction?
Yes.
Just be clear, I'm not an international litigator, so it's not my area of expertise, but some common sense things. Don't go to a non-democratic jurisdiction because the courts will not be independent. Don't go play somewhere there's a lot of corruption because you'll have to bribe your way through. Unless you're the person who's going to get sued and you want the whole thing to get kind of go on 50 years. Don't pick a jurisdiction you can't speak the language because that'll be very difficult for you. And remember, in the UK, we have at least 3 main jurisdictions. England and Wales is one, Scotland another, Northern Ireland's a third. English law is quite common. English courts is quite common because people understand the language. Courts are generally sensible, quite commercial. They let parties agree what they want. Some countries have a civil law basis, so you need to know what's in the civil code to understand the contract. The UK doesn't really have that. So, I think all the Anglo-Saxon jurisdictions are probably fairly similar. American is much more litigious, and some things you probably don't want to go to America for because they have jury trials for some things like patent disputes would be a jury trial, right? Often, or used to be, they might have changed it. And you don't want that kind of emotional thing being decided by juries. You'd much rather have a commercial judge who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Mark, for all that insight. Very helpful indeed. You can come back again in episode 8.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
What about a quick advertorial?
Okay, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Mark Sherwood-Edwards, Sherwood like the forest, -Edwards. Clearview Legal is the main company. If you want to send me an email, or if you want to subscribe to Oh Lordy, which is a weekly, short 2-minute read on legal and meta-legal issues, then email me at MSE, initials Mark Sherwood-Edwards, at clearviewlegal.co.uk.
So that's it for episode 7 of Procurement Says No. Thanks very much again, Mark. Thanks, Eduardo. And we'll see you all again next time. Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and before people search on Clearview, I made the classic lawyer's mistake of picking the name, and not seeing how many other Clearviews there are. It's actually called Clearview Legal, but it's clearly one of the most popular names, including window cleaners, right? There's loads of window cleaners called Clearviews, you might imagine.
Nice one. So you're actually a window cleaner as well, then?
Well, on the side, yeah, when business is a bit quiet.